Well, hi, Valley Fourth Church. Pastor Josh here for a community connection on the first week of March. The sun is shining. It's great to be outdoors, and we get to interview a wonderful couple from our church today. So before we get into the video, why don't you guys introduce yourselves, tell us your names, and a little bit about yourselves.
Okay. Well, I'm Ken Burget. This is my wife, Veronica, or Ronnie, as she's more popularly known.
Sometimes Nana Ronnie.
Nana Ronnie, yes, that's true, yeah. The cookie Nana
Yeah.
to the little kids. And we have two adopted children, Kathy, 60 years old, John, 59 years old. John lives in Leavenworth, Pennsylvania. I can't think of the name of the town right now. But anyway, he lives in Pennsylvania, and he's married and has a daughter and a wife, Sharon. And then our Kathy is a single mom. She had two children, grandchildren, Corey and Kelsey. And both of them are married. Corey has four children, our great-grandchildren, Cicely, Spency, Calvin, and Sawyer. And Kelsey does not have any children yet, but we're waiting on that, hopefully. So that's about it for our, I guess we've been married here 60 years, come June the 4th. And it seems funny, we came to this church 39 years ago, so I guess at that time we'd been married for only 21 years, so we've celebrated our 25th, our 50th, and now our 60th here at Valley Fourth. So,
well, wonderful. Yeah, that's fun.
Yeah.
Well, you said you're going to celebrate your 60th anniversary. I want to see if you can go all the way back in your mind and tell us about how you met.
Well,
and I want both versions of the story, too.
Both versions of the story, okay. Well, Ronnie immigrated to the United States and lived in New York City for several years.
Okay.
And then there was a friend of hers who lived in Fort Walton Beach, Florida. And Ronnie came down to visit her, and there was an Air Force base there in Fort Walton Beach, where I was stationed at the time. So it was in that little town of Fort Walton Beach that I first met Ronnie. She was out with a gentleman and another lady in a nice supper club type place, but they did have a little combo that was playing. And I noticed this one gentleman had two ladies sitting with him, so I decided I would ask Ronnie if she could dance, and they played a cha-cha, and she knew how to cha-cha. And I worked for a very brief period at Arthur Murray's, so I knew how to cha-cha. So we got up and we hit it off there on the dance floor.
It started with the cha-cha.
Yeah, started as a cha-cha, and we've been cha-chaing through it all along.
Ronnie, how do you remember that time when he first came up to that table?
Well, I was born and raised in England.
Okay.
And came to the States. And this was a neighbor. My girlfriend had four children, and I came to help her with the four children. And this gentleman, Pat was his name, Divine, Irish Catholic, and he came and asked if we would go out with him for the evening. So we went, and this gentleman came over, and he asked Pat if he could dance with me. And Pat said, "You'll have to ask the lady."
Oh.
So anyway, they were playing the cha-cha. And in England, you have a ballroom, and that's all you do is dance. You have a big orchestra and everything. So I was used to dancing, and we all learned to dance. And he, being an Arthur Murray instructor at one time, we did the cha-cha.
Okay.
And the
6 months later.
Well,
the rest is history.
a few nights later, he come and knocked on the door. He found out where I lived. And anyway, he asked me if I would go out for dinner. So
that was it.
The rest is history.
And I think we went to a barbecue joint for dinner. They had the best barbecue down there in Florida.
Okay.
Oh, it was good. Yeah. So.
Yeah, great story. I want to ask you another story. I want to ask you about the story of when you guys came to know the Lord. So I don't know where you want to begin that story, but
well, that begins, I would say, with our son John, who, when we adopted, was born in Germany. And he was 7 years old and didn't speak any English. So we came to the States not too long after we adopted him, and his English wasn't perfectly fluent yet. So we sent him in a Christian school because they were using the PACE format in the school at the time, where you progress along at your own rate. And we thought that would be the best way for him to learn English. So that was down in Texas when shortly after I'd retired from the service. Anyway, John had a little girlfriend there, and John got saved there. And so when I finished my schooling in Texas and we moved up to Spokane, John was in the habit of calling his girlfriend from Spokane, and at that time, long-distance calls were kind of expensive. So we told him, no calls without permission from Mom and Dad. But one night, we heard him talking on the phone, and Ronnie listened, and he was talking to a counselor from a Billy Graham program called I Found It. And he was asking for his mom and dad to be saved. Wow. And of course, Ronnie was Irish Catholic, and I was basically nothing. Anyway, but I had been to Glad Tidings Assembly here in Spokane and worked on their piano for an extended period of time, 2 to 3 days. I had it disassembled and all over the platform. And the pastor and the custodians of the church were up there looking at what I was doing and talking to me and so on. And I was just impressed with how nice and how friendly they were. And so anyway, when we heard John doing that, it just made us think, well, we need to take this young man to church. Okay. And I didn't want to go to the Catholic church. So we went to the church where I'd worked on the piano. I told Ronnie, I said, you'll love the colors in the church. They were all her favorite colors at the time. So poor excuse to go to a church, but nevertheless. And but Pastor Sandgren, who was the pastor that led us to the Lord, was very aggressive with his evangelism and so on. And we lasted about 3 services before we, at the altar call, we both went forward together. And
he sang.
Yes, and actually, there was a song that he sang called, it's well known now, but Jesus, Jesus, or something about that name. And Ronnie and I both found ourselves standing there weeping, and I was not accustomed to weeping. I couldn't.
Guilty.
But anyway, the Holy Spirit, I guess, convicted me, and so we went forward. And then Pastor Sandgren took us out to breakfast every Monday morning. And we would come home from breakfast with a handful of napkins with notes on them with scripture and so on and so forth. And he really grounded us, and we were very thankful for that. So that's kind of the story of how we got saved.
I think that's so neat how you guys both came to the Lord together like that.
Yes,
that's
I'm sure
God knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
And his wife also was redhead.
Oh.
And
pastor's wife,
we're still good friends today.
Good.
All those years. Yes.
Yeah.
And what, so how many years ago was that?
That was in October of 1977 when we were saved.
Okay.
Yeah. So, that
we've never, ever wavered, We
went to 3 or 4 churches, and actually, ended up here at Valley Forth, we began to, wasn't a problem, but the Pentecostal doctrine and so on and so forth was a little bit more than I could figure out. And so John was enrolled at Valley Christian School here, so we thought, well, let's go to Valley Forth. And Pastor Tom Starr was the pastor at the time. And we liked what we saw, and everybody was just so good and so nice and friendly. And so we planted ourselves here 39 years ago.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, I asked you to bring a scripture or two to share that are maybe your favorites.
Yeah.
So why don't you share those now?
Well, mine is Romans 12, 1 and 2. I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable unto the Lord, which is your reasonable service. And be not conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is the good, acceptable, and perfect will of God. And that's one of my favorite verses. And then the other short one that I like is Philippians 4:13, that I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me.
Yes.
Yeah. And Ronnie's looking up her verse here.
Yeah. Isaiah 54 is my favorite. Where am I?
No, take your time.
Yeah.
Isaiah. There you are.
There I am.
Keep going.
54. Yeah, I had it marked. And Isaiah 54:17. And it says, and it is I who created the destroyer to wreak havoc, but no weapon forged against you shall prevail, and you will refute every tongue. He will refute every tongue that accuses you. And this is the heritage of the servant of the Lord. And this is their vindication from me, declared the Lord. And this is the first thing that God gave me.
Wow.
And I've always claimed this, And coming from a very Catholic background, and Irish Catholic, worst kind.
Okay.
And another one is 2 Chronicles 7:13. When I shut up the heavens, and there is no rain, or command locusts to devour the land, or send a plague among my people, if my people who are called by my name would humble themselves and pray, and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, I will hear from heaven, and I will forgive their sins and will heal their land. Now my eyes will be upon and my ears attentive in the prayers offered in this place. And this I claim for today, because, it was a plague. And this is what we're going through now, is a plague. And God started it, and he'll finish it. So those are two of my favorites.
Well, thank you for sharing those. I'm sure some of our viewers will find some encouragement in those as well. Just a couple last questions as we close. Maybe tell us some of the ways you've been involved at Valley Forth, either ways you've been serving or groups you were connected to. How have you been involved here at the church over the years?
Well, my first service, I was approached by the man that was in charge of the deacons at the time to serve on the deacon board. So I did for a couple of years. And at the same time, Dwight Hires was the minister of Christian education, and we lost our Sunday school superintendent, so he asked me if I'd fill in there. So I did, and that was a great learning experience. But I was a Sunday school superintendent for 4 years. And then from there, I went to the Board of Elders, served on the Board of Elders for, I think, a total time of somewhere 25 or 26 years. Off and on, you have to take your time off. And then the only other ministry that I had was outside the church at the Union Gospel Mission.
Okay.
And Pastor Tom used to preach at the mission, and he would take Ronnie down to sing with him.
Oh, nice.
When he went. And so then after Pastor Tom passed away, another man took over, and Ronnie would sing with him. And when he left, then I started going. So for a total of 35 years, once a month, the first Friday of every month, Ronnie sang. And I don't want to say I preached because I'm certainly not a preacher, but I tried to share the word of the Lord with the men.
Well, good.
And so that was we loved that ministry. I was terrified the first time I ever stood up in front of those guys because that was a tough-looking lot at that time. But that many years ago, most of them were older men who the major problem was alcohol. And over the years, we watched as the crowd changed to a much younger group of people, and several other addictions, drugs of all sorts, and so on and so forth came into the picture. But the mission did a very good job of working with those men, and we saw many of them get into the program, come to the Lord, and we were just we just loved that ministry. But about 3 or 4 years ago, and I will have to say that for about 10 years, Jim and Star Chavez shared it with us, and I would do 1 month, and Jim would do the next, and both Star and Ronnie would sing. But anyway, I think we left there, about 2 years ago, the mission.
Okay.
And figured that 35 years, we'd find something else to do. So.
Yeah. How about you, Ronnie? How have you been involved at the church?
When Tom Stahl was here, he always gave an altar call. So whoever came up, you were involved in that.
Yeah.
The 2 rooms, one on each side. If it was a woman, I would take the woman.
Oh, okay.
And we would counsel them and follow up. And then Data Care, we were involved in that. I was in the choir. I was a soloist here for many years. And we'd go out knocking on doors also and invite them, to church or to Christ. So it was, we were very busy. And, of course, we had a big choir, too.
Yeah.
And we had prayer meetings. And I've had prayer meetings at my home for
25 years, every Saturday morning.
Every Saturday morning, yeah. And they come and they go. They leave town or whatever. But God always sends people, So it's coffee and bagels most probably, or if I make scones, And so there's just a few of us left. And God will bring different people. And then, like I said, they either leave town or they go on. So I still have that.
Oh, wonderful.
And till the day I die, I will have that. And it's just been a good ministry, and because lots of hurting people.
Yeah, people are hurting.
And I just love people.
Well, we appreciate all the things you've been able to do and help with. Last question, you've been here for almost 40 years. What's been the blessing for you in having a church family for almost 4 decades? What's the blessing in that?
Well, there's always been people that we could go to if we had questions of any sort, whether it was doctrine or just, what do I do in this situation and so on and so forth. Just a part of the fellowship that you have in a church. It just leads to that interaction with other people. And we've enjoyed that very much. And the stability of the church. I mean, 3 pastors in all those many years is, I think, very unusual. So the gospel has always been preached faithfully. They've never varied, and that goes on today.
And we're still in touch.
Yeah,
with like John, Pastor John, and with Tom. Well, no, Tom still died.
Yes. I don't know who you're talking about.
The first one.
That was Pastor Tom Starr.
Okay. We're in touch with another pastor.
Oh, Paul Sandgren.
Paul Sandgren.
Or the one that we were saved under. Yeah.
You know, as you get older, things happen to the mind. And I said, I miss my mind sometimes. But anyway, and getting old is not for sissies, I'm guaranteed.
God's good, though. He's blessed us in innumerable ways.
Abundantly.
And, so we have no complaints. The Lord's good always.
He is good.
Yes.
It's always so good to be reminded of God's goodness and encouraged by hearing your story.
Prayer to us is very, very important. You feed your spirit before you feed your body. And he has his own place where he goes, and I have my prayer room. And in the morning, no matter what is going to happen or go on, we put the Lord first.
That's great.
And then whatever happens, he knew about it, And anyway, that's what I tell. I used to counsel also, and so did Kim. And even as a Catholic, I prayed. Always, always, always prayed. So it was a habit that I had from a child. And we've seen God do great and mighty things just through prayer. Yeah. And we still believe prayer first.
All right. Well, that's a good note to end on. Prayer first, whatever you're facing as you're watching and listening to this video. Thank you, Ken and Ronnie, for taking time to be with us, sharing some of your life and story. Now you know another couple in our church, and hopefully you've been encouraged by their life. So thanks for watching. We hope to see you here at church on Sunday at either 9 or 10:30 a.m. We'll see you later.